To assemble the press for your press run, you'll need 5 basic components here. You'll need your rubber roller, your Dr. Blade assembly, your ink swords, your locking screws, your ink pan with the plug. Okay? When you grab these different devices, make sure that they're all in good condition. For instance, the Dr. Blade, when you get it, this is the very sharp edge. This is what's going to meter your ink off. Make sure that there's no nicks in the blade, scratches, dings, and make sure that the blade is clean itself. You don't want any buildup on the back side of that blade there. Your rubber roller, you want to make sure that it's in good condition too, that there's no major gouges or anything taken out of that. All right. Then you'll have your ink pan. Make sure that you get an ink plug, and the ink plug seats firmly down into the pan so that you don't get any leaks. To have your plates ready to go into the press, you need your plate cylinder with the plates mounted correctly. You've got your plate shaft that the plate cylinder will go on. Then you have your locking collars. Those 3 devices are what you need to put your plate into the press. On the press, this is our control station. We have our stop button, which will stop the machine. You have your jog button that will jog it only while it's, and as soon as you let off on the button, it'll stop. You hit jog and start at the same time, the press will run. You've got your speed up and slow down buttons. Then auto manual will allow you to turn the impression on and off manually or either back to automatic. But to power the machine on, you have an e-stop. That e-stop has to be pulled all the way up. That will start the press up. These controls are on basically every station on the press. Okay. When the power comes on, the analog roller begins to spin. You can see we have more light in the unit so that we can see now. For this setup though, I'm going to turn the power off so it's quieter, so that you can hear everything that's happening, but we will lose our light when the power goes off. In the ink station here, we have a couple minor components. We got to put a few more in. We have our analog roller, which is the device that carries the ink, and then we will meter the excess ink off the analog roller with the Dr. Blade. The plate cylinder will fit in place here, and that will impress against the impression cylinder. Now when the web is in the press, there will be paper wrapped around this, and that's obviously what you're going to print against. But we got to get this station built out and ready for ink. So we're going to put the step number 1 is putting in the rubber roller. So when you get the rubber roller, you have a gear side and an operator side. The gear has to go to the gear side, and the plastic collars have to go so that the taper on them and the flat part is at the back. And they just slide in. As such. You want to leave a little bit of an edge at the back of the rubber roller, and that's where the Dr. Blade will sit on. So the Dr. Blade assembly comes up, and before we put this in, we've already inspected the blades, make sure everything's good. The other thing we want to inspect is the position of the Dr. Blade on the assembly. This is too far back and will cut into the rubber roller. This needs to be more towards the end of the assembly system. So I'm going to show you another one that's in the correct position. This one's in the correct position. As you'll notice, this piece of metal is closer to the end of the slide there, whereas this one is not. So incorrect, correct. When this goes in, you have to set it at an angle onto the lip that you just made. And it's important that the rubber roller is right at the edge. Rotate it together as one unit. Pinch it with your fingers. Go to the other side and push it in parallel to the press. Okay. Locking screws that will go on the sides. When these go on, oops, get them started. Started. All right. These have to be completely tight up against the side of the frame, so I have to loosen that a little bit more so that goes tight. And then we do the same for the other side. Now that that's on, the rubber roller is free spinning. You never want to put your hands on the rubber roller when the press is on because you'll be at a pinch point. But the gap between the Dr. Blade and the analog roller, we want to get a little bit closer. So we got to turn both these screws that we just put in, the locking screws, That will push the whole assembly forward. Now, if you notice on the side, we have about a 3/4 of an inch gap here. We're going to take that down to about a 1/4 of an inch gap, and that should get us to the right spot. It's important that this is done parallel. So we turn in the locking screws, moving the assembly at the same time. Okay. Rubber roller. So we're down to about 1/4 inch, maybe a 1/2 inch. It's about what we want it to look like. And the rubber roller is still free spinning. You check by eye in here, you can see that you can still see a little bit of a gap between the analogs and the rubber roller, and that looks parallel. All right. To put the ink pan in, we need our 2 swords. And verify again that the plug's in the pan. All right. This cutout right here will go around the shaft of the rubber roller. All right. So the pan has to come in low, and then it lifts up around the rubber roller. All right, so we're going to put the pan in, coming in low. Then we're going to lift up. Then the swords go in the 2 holes on the side, and line up on the other side of the pan. Okay, and that's what we considered the station built out and ready for inking. Okay, so now we've got the assembly all together and we're ready to put ink in the press. When we're ready to put ink in the press, again, double check, make sure your plug is in the pan. Can't stress how important that is there. All right. Analogs is turning fine, we don't hear any scraping. If you hear scraping, the doctor blade is too close and you have to back off on the rubber rollers here. Okay. To put ink in, notice that the rubber roller, and I'm not going to put my finger in the press, but notice how the rubber roller is not spinning. Okay? When we put ink in, we want the rubber roller just slightly spinning. And if you can hear, there's a little bit of scraping going on. That means the doctor blade is already touching the analogs. We do not want that when it's dry. So we're going to back the blade away from the analogs by turning this clockwise. Turn it a few turns back. If you go too far back, it'll cut the rubber roller. Now we're going to come back to the rubber roller and turn it. I'm still hitting the analog, so I'm going to back the blade off more. There. Now see how the rubber roller is turning and we don't hear any scraping from the doctor blade, and the blade's not cutting into the rubber roller at all either. Right. So to put ink in the press, I'm going to pour this way so that it's easier for you to see, but basically just going to pour until we see the ink cover the rubber roller. There. Alright. So now the ink's covering the rubber roller and the analogs. Now typically I had the rubber roller too close. Typically you want it to cover the rubber roller first and not the analogs. So now what we want to do is we want to set the metering between the rubber roller and the analogs. So we're going to take the rubber roller and add pressure to it until we get an even wipe all the way across. See how we're hitting on this the operator side? We're going to back off and come in more on the drive side. Back off. Now we're going to come in even so that it meters at the same time. We do that so we know the rolls are parallel. Now we're going to back off just ever so slightly so that we get a striated look or a tin can look. So all that setting there was done by the locking screw, which drives the rubber roller and of course the doctor blade. Now we want to use the doctor blade to scrape that excess ink off right there. So we're going to turn these 2 screws, which if you follow them, they go straight to the doctor blade. You want to turn them counterclockwise towards the window to make them engage to the analogs. I'm going to do it parallel. So we're hitting in the center here pretty close, so we just keep turning evenly. can see we have either a bad spot in the doctor blade or a bad spot on the analox roller where it's carrying the extra ink. Okay, that's just a defect that happens to be on this roll at the moment. But as far as wiping goes, that's what you want right there in terms of wiping. You want a nice, clean, even wipe from the doctor blade. I'm going to show you what it looks like if it's not even when it goes in. So I'm going to start turning the screws. Everything you do here, you want to do it even. If it's not parallel, you're doing it wrong. I'm going to turn the screws at the same time, at the same speed. And notice how it's wiping on the gear side and not the operator side. So what you do not want to do is add more pressure here to wipe that. What you want to do is back this side off. Back it off by turning it clockwise. Bring this side in a little bit more. And then get it so that it wipes evenly at the same time. Okay? Now that you have it wiping evenly, okay, no major scratches or marks on the analox, we're going to put our plate cylinder in. These are the screws that adjust the plate cylinder. Okay? Put the plate cylinder in, you need a little bit of a gap at the top of the screw knob here. Okay? This is the plate shaft that you're going to use. When you're going to use the plate shaft, this pin has to be in the center of that block. Alright, this is how you adjust side-to-side register on this press. Okay, so pin's in the center of the block, and this will lock this shaft into the press. This screw, this tab, has to be almost all the way out on the shaft. Okay, for a 12-inch repeat, it goes into the second hole down from the top. The plate cylinder goes in, gear side to the gear side of the press. Never let the plate cylinder scratch or hit the analox roller. So it goes in, put it on the shaft, and then take the shaft all the way across. This has to line up with the hole, so you have to turn it so it lines up and goes all the way in. With it in, then you have to lock the screw, or lock this to the press by turning it counterclockwise. Until it's snug on the press. Now we got to get the plate cylinder lined up with the edge of the impression cylinder. Put your head in the press, look at the side of the plate cylinder, and slide it over till it lines up with the edge of the impression cylinder. This edge and that edge should line up. Now we're going to put the locking collars in. These locking collars can slide off, so you want to check them beforehand, make sure they do not slide off. The ones that slide off we have marked with tape. Alright, but if the tape comes off of this, then you want to still always check, make sure these don't slide off without you knowing. Alright, because they always fall in the ink pan, and you got to fish them out. Take the lock collar, set it on the shaft, take your free hand, line the collar around, and tighten it all the way down. Okay? And then make sure the plate cylinder is against the side of the lock collar. And then we'll put the lock collar on the gear side of the press. Now the plate cylinder's in. To verify it's in right, if I wiggle this side to side, it does not wiggle. Alright, so the plate is in correctly. When it's time to print, we got to get the gear engaged with the press. So now we got to turn the plate screws down, plate impression down. Typically for a 12-inch repeat, you're going to be below this piece of metal right here. Alright, once you get below that, then you're going to start spinning the plate cylinder a little bit until it just engages in the press. Okay, so that's good. If you go too far, notice how when I try and move this, it doesn't really wiggle. Alright, if you go too far like that, what happens is the plate is not spinning, but the analox roller is spinning. And that spinning of the anti-lock roller rubbing against the plate will burn away the plate and make it non-printable. So this one is too tight. I'll back it off. And that's what you want there. Okay? Now, final thing here. Each station has a plate gap setting. This is to get the print pretty close and register with all the other colors. So for this station here, the plate gap needs to be at the 1 o'clock position on a clock. So it needs to be about 1 o'clock. So over here, you can see your plate gap is at what we would call 9 o'clock. Okay? So we're going to loosen the plate shaft a little bit. We're going to take the plate gap. There's 12 o'clock. There's 1 o'clock. So plate gap's at 1 o'clock and it's still loose.